Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Aftermarket Insider. Excuse me. This is season 1, episode 11, and this is your podcast for Thursday, August the 27th, 2020. Podcast is presented by our friends at Pioneer Car Electronics. You know, Pioneer is the global leader in car electronics and a proud supporter of automotive enthusiasts and events like Joe's Mini Bike Reunion everywhere. You know, no matter what you drive, Pioneer's got the gear to upgrade your ride, to make it sound better, and to connect with the latest technologies like Bluetooth, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and new for 2020, Amazon Alexa. Remember, don't break up with your car. Upgrade it with Pioneer. Learn more from our friends at pioneerelectronics.com. A big shout out to our friends at Pioneer, particularly my main man, Ted Cardenas. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Hope that your week's going well. Give a couple shout outs to my man, Richard White. Looks like Warren Kozakov, the VP of sales over there at SEMA, is watching. Colin Smith, AJ Diverson, and a few other folks. Thanks for the growth in our audience. I'd like to recognize a few new folks that have become friends of the Aftermarket Insider podcast. Maria, Bunyan Rue, Adrian Cyrone, Imar Will, Tim Wilson, James Gillespie, Tim Stewart, our buddy Zach Farah from Gearstar, Brandon Evans, Joe Clark, Rich Bauer. Here's a blast from the past, Tony Rhodes, Chris Horn. We got a celebrity watching us, Mike Finnegan from Roadkill, Pat Walsh, a former ad sales guy over at Prime Media and the Motor Trend Network. Good to have you watching us, Pat. Matt Heller, the owner of Horn Blasters, Amy Gills, Mike Spataro, Matt Graves, Dallas Kelly, Bree DeMarco, and a few others. The list keeps growing, so we appreciate the support. Mike Rysecki from London. Wow, we're international now. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to a recent Aftermarket Insider guest, Jim Savis, and his lovely wife, Amy. While we took some time off this last month, my wife and I enjoyed some time with Jim. We RV'd. We went up to Utah and spent some time hanging out over at Bryce Canyon, which is a national park, which was really enjoyable. And I want to thank Jim and Amy for the hospitality. We had a really good time there. I also would like to begin the podcast by giving a special Aftermarket Insider good wish to my mother-in-law, Irene. Linda's mom is home recovering from a recent heart pacemaker procedure. I want to say installation because everything we talk about is car related, but we'll call it a procedure. She's back home. She's doing well. She's tough as nails, and we love her to death. And I would be remiss to not give her a little bit of a shout out. I took some time off, as I mentioned, only because there was so much going on. Those of you may actually felt the same way. You know, we've all been living under this isolation and kind of staying put for the most part. And we had had enough. You know, I wanted to get out. I wanted to do something. We were looking at our RV from the window of our house day after day after day. And finally, it's like we decided to get out and do something. If you have not had that chance to do it yourself, I can tell you that it was well worth the effort. Took my mind off a lot of things. Simultaneously, our producer, Emmanuel, who's had a pretty busy dance card himself with everybody and their brother trying to do podcasts and doing these type of Zoom conference calls. So Emmanuel's a tech guy, and as a result, he's been busier than a one-armed paper hanger. So both of us were able to take advantage of this time away. And honestly, I was missing it. So I'm glad to be back. I'm very, very happy to announce today's guest is Tom Gattuso, the Vice President of Events at the SEMA Show. Tom was our initial guest on the podcast, and I candidly had been on him since we all learned about, it's probably going on its second week, that the SEMA Show, as we knew it for 2020, had made a decision to cancel the event. And when I'd actually known about that right around the time it was going to be announced. For those of you who are fans of the podcast, you realize that we broke the Hot Rod Power Tour announcement about their cancellation for the event. And although I had a little bit of an insight as to the announcement to be made about the SEMA Show, I'm a vendor to them. I'm a part of the SEMA family, I would like to think. And I felt it would be much more appropriate for me to back off and allow SEMA to make the announcement. And when they did, the responses came, and they came hot and heavy. uh, through social media. Everybody must have had a chance either through the SEMA Show Facebook page or the SEMA Show Twitter page or all the other various social media outlets that you have. When something like the SEMA Show gets talked about, it gets out there quick. And before you know it, everybody knew about the SEMA Show being canceled, and there was a reaction. And when I talked to Tom, he was not only available for me, but it made more sense to give him some time before he came on to the podcast so that he can really share some insight that would be much, much more beneficial to those of you who have an interest in it. So with that said, here we are, the return of the podcast again. Happy to be a part of it and happy to bring back the vice president of the SEMA Show and a good friend of the Aftermarket Insider family, Tom Gattuso. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Happy to be part of it. I think after your break, I'm the first guest again, right?
Yeah, you're the first guest twice, Tom. And I couldn't think of anybody that honestly has a lot to say about what's going to affect all of us. So with all that said, I've been doing some snooping, as I typically do, just looking at some of the social media. And because of my role in the industry where I'm selling to many manufacturers, I'm on the phone with a lot of them. Largely in my role, we too, Bonnier Corporation, produce events, and we recently had to make an announcement ourselves. In fact, I chatted with you about it as it related to our California shows, the Off-Road Expo and the Sand Sport Super Show, which are iconic events, Off-Road Expo being one that's near and dear to you, since you played such a major role in it prior to your time at SEMA. So we had to make the announcement about our events being, in some cases, canceled, and in some cases, we're trying to move them. And it's been an interesting challenge. It's been a string with a gorilla attached to it, but I found that folks right now, they're just appreciative for anybody making the effort to try to produce a show in light of what all is going on. And I saw a lot of comments, Tom, to the reaction from folks on social media about the SEMA show being canceled. And a lot of them said just that. Hey, thanks, SEMA, for trying. We really appreciate it. And we know your hands were a little bit tied, and we're looking forward to next year. Is that kind of the gist of the response that you've been getting?
A little bit. What we heard was that it was a hard decision to make, but at the end of the day, a lot of people felt it was the right decision to make. But I've spent my career, essentially, I've been working on live events for 25 years. And this is the first time that I've really gone through a process like we just went through. So it was really, really hard. And I got to tell you, we started to do scenario planning on different options all the way back in May and June. But we always had this push to do the live event. And we were really working with our partners in Las Vegas to figure out a way to make it happen. And, we'll talk about that a little bit today, but we tried to pull all the strings we could, and we got to this point where our members and our exhibitors were going to be making investments, and we didn't have a clear runway with Las Vegas. And I probably know more than I should about the governor in Nevada, and I've read transcripts of every speech the guy's given since the April timeframe. Because we really, really, really were just trying to figure out a way to make it happen. At the end of the day, we circled the wagons, and we decided that because there was so much uncertainty on whether we'd be able to do it in November, we had to make the tough decision about 90 days out. It was almost 90 days to the day to stop planning for that live event. And it was hard. It was really emotional for our staff. It was the 54th SEMA show that would have been happening. And all of our partners and just what's happening to the events industry has just been really, really hard to participate and be a part of. And I just can't wait until we get through this and start to get back to some level of community gathering again.
Tom, I love the analogy about the SEMA show being a huge aircraft that picks up a lot of speed, carries a lot of passengers, needs a big runway to land, and also it's pretty tough to turn around. I think we've used up every possible anecdote there, but the reality of it is that's a good visual. What was it if you could share, what was it and what were some of the topics that you guys, you being SEMA and the other guys being the partners that were so relevant to the show being realized, what were some of the things that ultimately led to your decision during those final days before you ultimately had to make the call?
So we met with Las Vegas, specifically the convention center, and they've got good communication going with the city of Las Vegas and with the state of Nevada, and specifically the governor. And we really wanted to know, because at the time, we could congregate up to 50 people. That was the maximum in Nevada, and it still is. So it's hard to do a SEMA show with a maximum of 50 people. So we really wanted to just know what the window looked like and what the process was going to be. And as we were going through that question and answer process, we found out that the governor was going to change the phasing system. So at the time, there was a 4-phase strategy in Nevada where they were going to go from phase 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And had they gone from phase 2 to phase 3, we really had a great window of opportunity, because phase 3 was something where we had learned potentially it could have things at 50% capacity. And when you talk about density levels and distancing and that type of thing that you need to employ in an event, we were able to make the math pretty much work. So we were anxious to see what it would take to get to phase 3 and how we could help and incorporate some of the partnerships in the city that we had to help that happen. But we learned that the phasing system was going to change. And Nevada came out with a different strategy where it was really up to how the testing results were going. So they now have a new system where they're doing these weekly updates, but really a weekly monitoring of 7-day average testing rates and 7-day average hospitalization rates and that type of thing with the COVID virus. And that was something where there wasn't this clear, distinct path on, if we do this, then we can do this, then we can do this. So because of that unclarity, it was really hard to be able to put a flag in the ground in November and say, this is definitely going to happen, or it's a 90% chance that it's going to happen. And you can't really build the SEMA show on that uncertainty. Our exhibitors were starting to get to a point where they were investing time, effort, energy, and money into what their booth product was going to look like. And our attendee base was starting to plan hotels and airfare and strategies on what they were going to do at the show. And we couldn't let all that effort go for nothing. So it was a hard decision to do it as far out as we did. And you could argue 90 days is probably, far out compared to, say, 60 or 30.
Yes, definitely a fair number of days for anybody to make an adjustment, unlike anything under 60. 90 days, gee, or hopefully, because we have companies that are 10 by 10 guys with a new widget up to the most iconic companies in the world. So running that gamut. When the announcement was made, Tom, what was the initial reaction from the exhibitors at the show? Did you get a little bit of a sense of relief from maybe your conversations with Warren and some of the other salespeople? Did you find any of the customers that maybe were upset? What kind of feedback did you get from the exhibitors?
We really had a lot of support from exhibitors. And really, Joe, what I experienced was a decision like this is really, really weighty. And nobody really wanted to be the one to make the decision. So they were willing to go with us until we told them we couldn't. And I was guilty of the same thing. I was going forward with this live event and pushing our team to just continue to stay focused on the live event until the governor of Nevada told us we couldn't, or until the Las Vegas Convention Center said we couldn't. So, I'm not using that as an excuse to say I didn't want to make that decision, but that's the weight of what we were working on. It was that. So when we finally made the decision, we needed to do that. We went, we got all the information, we shared all this information with our board of directors, so they were able to make an informed decision. But then we needed to be the industry leader, and we needed to help these companies be able to see that, what was going to be transpiring, and help make that decision for them. So I have to say there was a sense of relief for some companies, because they didn't know exactly how they were going to be able to work it out and exactly what it was going to look like. they trusted that we had their best interests at hearts, and that when we were moving forward with it, they were behind us. But when we finally said, there's just no clear path, you're going to be investing money, and we don't have certainty that you'll be able to get return on that, they understood and they said, well, thank you. Thank you for stepping up and leading the industry in that way, because that's your role as a trade association. So I'd say we got good support from the decision. It was a really hard one, but at the end of the day, I don't know that anybody is really looking at us saying that we made the wrong decision. And I'm still watching everything that comes out of the governor's office. I'm still looking at scenarios, but we're not planning the live event at this point, and we're moving forward.
Tom, how much of a role do you think the decision that CES made out front of your ultimate decision to cancel the show this year, did that put any added pressure on you, or did that maybe put somewhat of a thought in the minds of some of the SEMA show exhibitors once they heard that CES had decided to not put their show on, which wasn't until January of next year? They made that announcement sooner. Did you feel anything as a result of CES decision?
So there's two answers to that question. I can answer that personally, and then I can answer it from our exhibitor feedback. And I'll start with the personal one. I got motivated by that because when I read their press announcement, they had alluded to the fact that they weren't sure they'd be able to do the event safely. And we had a really good safety plan, and we had what I felt was going to be something where we could still have the industry gather, and we were going to put some things in place that would help us mitigate some of the larger crowds that we were going to have and help socially distance and spread them out. So I got motivated. I wanted to see if we could figure out a way to do it. And that got us down our scenario path of, what if we moved everything outdoors? Would that make a difference with the state of Nevada? Would they see that differently? I was pestering the convention center to give me air quality numbers on the difference between a building with a 30-foot ceiling and this new, they just got accredited with a GBAC certification, which is the highest certification a facility can have in the cleaning industry for air filtration and pandemic protection, if you will. So we were doing like air quality things where we could make a case that our show had great air quality, was going to be safe, we could distance people. So at that time when CES made that decision, I got motivated, and we were pushing our team to be motivated and move forward. We did have some of the doubters, though, and that's the second part to the question, where people asked us, if CES feels they can't make it safe, what makes you feel like you can? And really the difference is, and I empathize with CES, I understand why they did what they did, but they're in 5 different facilities. They're in the Las Vegas Convention Center, they're at the Sands, they're in the Aria Hotel, they've got stuff at the Westgate and the Wynn.
I think Mandalay Bay too, don't they? I mean,
yeah, they're all over the city in terms of things that they would need to protect and control. So from there, ours is a much more controllable environment. We literally were looking at a scenario where we were going to enclose the entire campus of the convention center inside a fence line. And we were going to be able to qualify and vet everybody that came in there and do a health screening and make sure that we were checking temperatures and that type of thing. And in doing that, we could control the environment, and we were doing the math knowing that we could fit the amount of people that we needed to in that facility and on the grounds to be able to have enough manufacturer-buyer interaction to have people get really good return. So we did have some people second guessing, like CES said they can't do it. They're bigger than you guys are, supposedly in the city. And what makes you think you can? So there was a little bit of second guessing there, but at the same time, we were committed to our plan, and really were hopeful that the climate was going to change. And I don't know if you've ever watched one of these COVID graphs, but with every single day, Nevada and the city of Las Vegas was publishing some of their testing results. And it was like a roller coaster. You watch it and you get optimistic, and another day you watch it and you get down a little bit. So we were just trying to build ourselves up and watch the 7-day average And it's been moving in the right direction, but still to this day, the maximum amount of crowds that can gather is 50, and the pathway for November is still really unclear.
You know, I have a lot of friends that I, uh, I I talk to, and they know that I'm in the automotive industry, and many of them realize that I have little to do with SEMA. And it seems as if anytime anyone saw me, that would be the topic. And then I would have friends that would contact me saying, "Hey, I just found out that the Raiders, you know, they're the second biggest thing in the city of Las Vegas, second to the SEMA show, but everybody's talking about the new Raider Stadium and how they just announced, you know, this was a while back, that there'll be no fans attending any of the games there this year." And I start to think about, you know, those poor guys. They had so much at stake. They built this huge stadium in Las Vegas and zillions of dollars and rushed to build it, only to be greeted with a punch in the face that their biggest source of revenue is the fans that come in and buy the $30 beers and the $60 parking. That none of that's going to be realized this year. And, you know, it stopped me because I just wonder, and I wonder out loud, even with SEMA, is like, okay, now what? Fortunately, SEMA is a very solid company and has been around forever and has the dollars, the staff, the mindset, and the experience, where fortunately you're able to absorb a blow that has this much impact. I feel for some of the other folks, Tom, that are in our industry that don't have enough and assets to get through this tough time. And we're still seeing, and a lot of these guys with the smaller car shows and a lot of the guys with, you know, the new car shows particularly, they're going to struggle. We struggled, as I mentioned earlier, with Bonnier events, just trying to not only keep the spirit of having the event happen, but find a state that can cooperate. And then once you found a cooperative state, you had to then get lucky again to see if they had available weekends. And then if you got lucky enough where you found a state that had available weekends, you just prayed to God they were a good partner, and that the space that they told you was going to be available turns out to be available. When you know, there's so much that goes on. It is a little bit of a struggle. Once you made the decision and you got a little bit of the feedback, you know, we talked about a little bit of a sense of relief. Do you think that that's universally now the spirit that everybody has, that they got over the initial announcement that the show's not going to happen, but now there is a little bit of they get to relax just a second and maybe gear up for what they're all looking at as being a bigger and stronger and almost the best ever SEMA show for 2021. So it seems as if the spirit is all positive. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, the spirit's definitely been positive, but I got to tell you, Joe, we started to really learn on a different level what the SEMA show represents. And we are at this place where we understand that it's a buyer-seller connection in this environment that we build. And as a trade association, our job is to help our member companies succeed. But what we are now seeing is that there was this community mind share that happens at the SEMA show. And it's not just the SEMA show in general, but it's this transfer of information and this idea sharing and this networking and all this stuff that happens in this week. And once the industry reacted to what was happening with the live event and it not being planned any further, this community mindshare came up and said, well, this still exists. And it wasn't one person. It's this, you know, transcending concept where it still is there. There's still innovation happening. There's still vehicles being built. There's still products being manufactured and debuted. So that is really, really important. And when you're a leader in the industry as a trade association, you identify that and you try to figure out how we can best make use of that. And this is a thing, we don't necessarily own it, but we own this, right? This is what we've created over the last 53 years. We were going to have the 54th one where this mind share comes into Las Vegas and happens in the environment of the SEMA show. So there's great responsibility with that. And for us to be able to just say, okay, 2020 wasn't our year. we're going to circle the wagons and make 21 better than any show we've ever had. That's great, but we can't ignore and we can't walk away from this mind share that's going to happen. So that was what we started planning back in the May, June timeframe on different scenarios. And we continue to this day, hours ago, continuing to figure out a way that we can help the industry realize this and facilitate some of the connections that naturally just need to happen.
One of the things that I've heard and I know from experience is that the exhibitors go there for that one-on-one contact. I do think that the days of big companies coming in to sit down with manufacturers to write their check for their year, that although that scenario may not be as prevalent now as it was back in the day, there's that unique void now that folks will have because they don't have that ability to make that annual connection with their partners. There's that void now of getting that new product out there in front of this large audience so that sales can happen. Folks have asked about, well, what are we going to do about that? I talked about the Facebook page, the SEMA PRI page that folks are populating to figure out how they're going to make up for what they lost out and what they would accomplish at the SEMA show. Now with the SEMA show not happening, what can they do? What is SEMA doing, Tom, for those folks that would still need a little bit of a nudge and some help with intros and relationships, or possibly getting their new products promoted? What do you have available for some of those folks now?
Yes, so we're working on scenario plans, and we've got a couple different options already built in, right? We've got regular channels of communication with our e-news and our SEMA news and our website and social media stuff. So to a certain extent, we can continue to push some of the innovation and try to make some of the connections that way. But we're seeing the same void, and we're seeing this opportunity to be able to create an online solution, an online community that can come together and really accomplish four main things: new products, a buyer-seller connection, call it a marketplace, if you will, feature vehicles and builders that are happening, and then some of the world-class education that we do at the show. So when you start to really think about that and how that can manifest itself, you start to evolve this thinking to what that can look like. And I got to tell you, the trade show industry, which I'm a student of, has been evolving. And when COVID first reared its ugly head, a lot of events that had to cancel initially just came out and said, we're going to do a virtual trade show. And some of those initial offerings fell short of some of the perception that people went into them thinking. So when we made our transition and when we said we were going to stop planning for our live event, we mentioned specifically in our announcement that we were going to be considering digital alternatives. And we're there today where we're still considering that. We're going to be making a significant announcement here soon. But we were trying to see how we could best serve the industry in the wake of the live event not happening, knowing that you can't replace a live event, and still handle those four things: the buyer, seller, new products, vehicles, and education. So as we're morphing that and developing that plan, we're staying away from a virtual trade show and a digital replacement for the SEMA show, and building more around the community and the connections that we can make within that. So it's really going to be interesting to see, how the industry is going to evolve through this, and how digital is going to play a role in that. But we have done enough research with our members, and we've done a survey with our members where we know there will be support for a digital solution of some sort, and we're going to key on that, and we're going to develop something that they're going to get some value out of, and be able to serve the industry that way.
Oh, that's great news. And I don't know how I could have forgotten the importance of the vehicle presentation. And I do see how I could, for a second, just forget about the importance of the education, because let's face it, I go there for the people in the cars mostly. And as not being a business owner, a lot of the the educational stuff that SEMA offers doesn't usually make its way to my schedule, but I know people come specifically for that. So those two additional things, the feature vehicles, the builders, and the education, glad that you brought that up because of its importance. Within the big SEMA umbrella, many folks realize, Tom, that PRI is parked underneath that umbrella now. It's been a part of the SEMA house now for years. Recently, Dr. Jamie Meyer was announced as leading the PRI initiative. I think there may be some other folks joining him in a management capacity. Any insight that you could give us as to some of the social media inquiries as to, okay, some folks have taken this path that the SEMA show's canceled, PRI will be next, and that leads to a banter of questions and comments. I know that you aren't looking over the PRI show, but knowing that you have obviously a role, either directly or indirectly, within the SEMA offices, is there any insight you can give us as to what folks may be able to expect about this PRI show and its status?
Absolutely. So again, thanks for the disclaimer, because I'm the SEMA show trade show nerd and lead the team here on the event in Nevada. But I just want to take a step back and talk about this clear path and what a runway can look like. And Indiana is different than Nevada. So right now, Indiana has a 5-phase approach to their reopen plans, and they're managing their moving averages of testing rates and that type of thing as well. So when you look at them, Indiana itself is in phase 4.5 out of 5, which is good. And the Indianapolis Convention Center has been really proactive in trying to figure out a way to be able to produce events safely. So they've got really good safety plans and that type of thing in place. But when you start to talk about what the path can look like, PRI has an opportunity where they could apply to the Marion County Health District. And they can say, here's our safety plan, here's what our show looks like, these are the amount of people that we're expecting. And there's a entity that looks at that and says, okay, yeah, we like the plan, or here's a couple things we'd want to change. So the PRI shows had the ability to go through that, and they've been able to make that application happen. In Nevada, we didn't have that same luxury. You know, for us, the runway wasn't as clear. But at least in Indianapolis, they're looking at the plan, and they've got, you know, health stakeholders within the state that are reviewing that stuff, and specifically Marion County, where Indianapolis is. So that's really a good view. If you know, to use the airplane analogy, if you're in the pilot seat of that plane, there's things you can do in order to start to get a vision of what December can look like. And that's the state that PRI is in right now, where they've got something where they can see what December is going to look like, and they still have a lot of support for the show. You know, there's almost 900 companies that are currently supporting that event, and it's a different event than SEMA, where it's all racing. And you know, they used to say 5, 6, 7 years ago, if it didn't bolt on a race car, it wasn't at the PRI show. And I used to go with that mentality to the show and look at that, because before PRI was part of SEMA, you know, I used to study that event and really knew the ins and outs of that. So it's a different industry, and I think they've got a different support base that's, again, doing the same thing. They're looking at PRI as an industry leader, and they're saying, okay, we want to know what's going on. Please be transparent with us and tell us what's going on, but we're with you. So the addition of Jamie Meyer is us moving in that direction. And he is, you know, really in tune with the industry, and he's really going to help PRI evolve and really be a leader in the racing industry and the racing market. And he's been really transparent with things. So there's been some announcements, and there's you know, there's things that are still coming down the road. But the governor of Indiana spoke yesterday and continued to refine what was going to be happening with their phasing plan. And I think you'll see some announcements from PRI where people will be able to get some clarity. But I called it internally with the folks that I work with, where I had I had state jealousy, call it event jealousy,
Sure.
where they had a better path to follow, and it's just more clarity. And I'm not necessarily knocking on Nevada because they've got a different thing that they're managing, and the city of Las Vegas is different, say, than the city of Indianapolis. But I like the clarity that they've got, and I'm really pitching in as much as I can with moral support, or if they need any help from me, we're doing that. But clearer path, and I think you'll start to see some announcements coming soon that will help people understand what that's going to look like.
When we talk about the state of Indiana, a couple of things that I'm aware of. Bonnie Air has an event that's a go for September 18th and 19th at the Marion County Fairgrounds. It's the Four-Wheel and Off-Road Jamboree Nationals. It's an event that's been going on for decades. Clear path. Recently, they had the Indianapolis 500. There weren't any fans there, but they put the event on. I feel that PRI, being 3 to 4 months down the road, has that advantage going for it. It's not an event that is next month or the month after. And Mecum Auction, I think, has successfully had events there. I don't know what restrictions they had to abide by. They're in the state fairgrounds, I believe. So I'm not sure what the dynamics were there. But yeah, PRI has kind of a feel of positivity where, okay, look, this is one that I may be able to see you at. And it looks as if that state has a little bit more of an interest in having an event rather than not having the event. So our hopes are that all those folks who love to hook a left, which is how I always remember the PRI show from SEMA, anything that hooks a left is going to be at the PRI show. But even when I go there now, there's folks that just have hardcore drag racing straight line acceleration parts there. So even the PRI face has changed a little bit, where it's not just the hardcore oval track guys. And I do believe that since PRI has come underneath the SEMA umbrella, look, Steve Lewis did a great job with that event and had a whole, he did a great job. But I just think that the way that we're looking at the PRI show now that's under the SEMA umbrella and how we want it to evolve, that show is going to continue to be a fan favorite for not only the exhibitors, but also the spectators. And I always loved going there. It was in December. It was after the SEMA show where you had a chance just to regroup one more time. It was around the holidays. And I would look forward to, I think the industry would welcome the opportunity to get together one time towards the end of what has been a very tough year to celebrate each other and to celebrate, hopefully, the beginning of a great 2021.
Yeah, you make some great points there, Joe, and you can't talk enough about Steve Lewis and the influence he had on that show. One thing I wish I had been able to do is work a little bit more with Steve, because he's a straight up and down events person, and he's got a lot of experience even before the PRI show doing successful events. But when people talked about what was going to happen with PRI once SEMA acquired that, it was interesting to hear some of the feedback, and you hear different opinions. But one of the things that we were able to bring to it was this organizational entity, and really this need to survey people and understand what their needs are and that type of thing. And I remember, I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a town hall event that normally was a SEMA thing, but PRI had its first town hall. And at that time, Wade Kawasaki and Scooter Brothers and Chris Kirsting were members of a panel. And we heard loud and clear from the racing industry at that point that PRI needed a voice in the industry. And they didn't feel at the time that SEMA was doing that. And SEMA being an industry leader like we are, we took a step back and we said, okay, let's come up with a solution. And really establishing a foothold in the community was something that was really important for us. And establishing a membership type of entity within the racing industry was another thing we wanted to build. And when they decided that they were going to hire a president to run PRI and have an office in Indianapolis and really start to move that ball forward, it was refreshing for me because it was us seeing, okay, what effect does SEMA have on a show that exists and is already successful? It's got this extra thing where we were able to listen to people and we had the bandwidth and the resources to be able to do it. So when you talk about what Dr. Jamie Meyer is going to do, not only with the current team, but his forward-looking future for what he's doing with influencers in the racing industry and what he's going to be doing with racers themselves and how he's going to be able to push that industry forward with a great team in Aliso Viejo, but then also adding an office in Indianapolis, you really start to sit back and go, wow, this really did come full circle. And I'll share with you one last thing on that. When I worked at SEMA, there was a handful of companies that I wanted to work for. When I got my job at SEMA, I was really happy. PRI was a company that I would have loved to have worked for. And it wasn't within 2 years of me starting to work at SEMA that we made an announcement at one of our hallway briefings that Scooter Brothers kind of led the board to purchasing the PRI show. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I work for a company that now is the place I want to work, but just brought into their fold another place that I wanted to work. So that was great. And that was this forward thinking ability for the association to say, can we make 1 + 1 = 3? And it's taken 7 or 8 years, but now we're making 1 + 1 = 4. And we're going to see the results of that in the racing industry like they hadn't even comprehended it.
Your website in front of Dr. Jamie. Jamie was one of those guys that he was on the top of everybody's list. And now taking somebody that was just so sought after at PRI and then bringing him to head up that show, folks will continue to seek him out, but I guess just in a different capacity now. So we were excited to hear about Jamie's appointment. Couldn't have really found a better guy. He comes from GM and he's thoroughly invested in the industry. He's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I have had the opportunity to meet with him several times. And if memory serves me, it was like at SEMA functions like NPMC, PRI, and SEMA. And it was always interesting to see how a guy handled himself who was so sought after. I've seen many folks get a big head and turn into ogres, and I've watched him handle it as if he's just another one of the guys taking an order. Very calm, very cool, very professional, smart as a whip. So congratulations to him for finding what I would think would be his dream job, having an opportunity to now really take his skill set and apply it to the PRI show. And again, to your point, it seems pretty likely that we'll all be having a chance to have this conversation in person at PRI in December, which I'm hopeful for. Tom, is there anything that maybe you hadn't had a chance to talk about that you'd like to add? And then I've got maybe a question or two from some folks that they'd like to ask. Is there anything that maybe I missed? Oh, look at that.
Hold on a second. I was just taking a drink of water, Joe.
Tom, is that the Aftermarket Insider official coffee cup that you're using? Those are available.
I'm not sure. I just grabbed this out of the cupboard this morning. Oh, is that what that says on it? I just grabbed that out of the cupboard this morning.
Yes, your check's in the mail, Tom. Thanks. Hey, Mike Rysecki from London wants to know, hey, Tom G, thank you for managing a difficult situation in such a thoroughly professional manner. Looking forward to 2021 better than ever. Are you planning on any major changes to the familiar format that folks are aware of? Are there any new elements that maybe were going to be launched at the SEMA show this year that maybe you'll save for next year? And that comes from Mike Rysecki. Mike, thanks for the question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. And the thing that happened in this COVID environment is construction. So Nevada never stopped building the West Hall. And the West Hall is going to come online here end of December and be ready for trade shows in January. So once Las Vegas gets back up and the Las Vegas Convention Center is ready to go, there's going to be a brand new exhibit hall. So we're excited to see how we're going to be able to use that. And we're going through a bunch of scenario plans from that respect as well. So I would say, yes, the show's going to look different than it ever has. We're going to use a different hall than we have. And we're also going to have the full use of the entire facility. So we're going to be able to add basically an exhibit hall the size of Central Hall across the street from where we are right now, and it's going to help the show really expand and broaden the reach. The other thing that we're going to do is we're exploring these digital solutions, and like I said, we're looking to make an announcement here really soon on what our solution is going to be. But we see that as something that's going to be connected to our show for the long term. So when you look at the 70,000 people the 70,000 buyers that are at our show, or the 160,000 industry professionals, we think we can double or triple or quadruple that over the next 5 years. So we can really have more of a worldwide reach and have more of an international reach to what our manufacturers are doing and how they can spread their products and their innovation throughout the world. So really exciting stuff going on right now, and we're looking forward to what 2021 is going to bring. The process is long and involved, and there's a lot of people on the team that are working on it, but you're astute to point out that it's always changing, and we've inherited that, and we're going to continue that. It will always change, and it will always try to improve.
That is for certain. It's the SEMA show. It's the straw that stirs the drink in our industries. He's Tom Gattuso. He's the vice president of the SEMA show. Tom, thank you as always. Not only do I wish you guys the best going forward, I'm excited to continue to play a role helping however I can. For those of you who listen to the podcast today, thanks so much. Once again, I appreciate you listening. If you feel the show's got some merit, tell a friend. I want to thank our sponsors from Pioneer Car Electronics. Once again, don't break up with your car audio. Upgrade it with Pioneer. I'm Joe Supergatti. I'm your host for the Aftermarket Insider podcast. We hope you had a good of a time as we did. Tom, thanks so much for your time. I'll let you get back at things there. As we know, the SEMA show for 2020 will not take place. However, I think it's very clear and very obvious now that the SEMA show 2021 is going to be probably the best one to date. We look forward and are very hopeful to see everybody at the PRI show in Indianapolis this December. Should you have any questions about the status of the SEMA show, whether it is questions about maybe some of your deposits for your booth, which are all going to be refundable. I saw online some folks that had some questions about the status of their credentials and would they roll over. I still see some idiots online asking about where they buy tickets because they want to bring their girlfriend this year. It's not a consumer show, everybody. It's a trade show. But I guess with all the questions that still may linger, your one-stop shop for information is the SEMA Show website, semashow.org. Check out semashow.com for those of you that are members. Look at the weekly SEMA e-news. And hey, when in doubt, pick up the phone. They actually answer it there at the SEMA Show. Tom, thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good time with your son this weekend, maybe checking out a car show or watching some baseball. And I would be remiss to not recognize the fact that there are a lot of folks that through this pause where there are no, whether trade shows or car shows, a lot of folks are talking about creating car shows for next year and getting the band back together, so to speak. And one of those guys is a guy that we know, Trader Tim. And Trader Tim Sasamian is going to be putting on an event next year, March of 2021 at the Santa Anita Fairgrounds, Trader Tim show, where it's going to be anything with a spark plug. And, you know, Tim is one of those guys that has been in the industry as a manufacturer. He's been in the industry as a supplier. He's a car guy. He's a racer. And I'm hearing more and more stories like Tim Sasamian, where guys are going out, starting events to get the cars back out there and get the people back together. And I'm really looking forward to all that myself. Once again, it's the Aftermarket Insider brought to you by Pioneer. Keep an eye out on the Facebook page and we'll give you the dates for our next podcast. And with all that said, have a great rest of the week. I look forward to seeing you the next time on the Aftermarket Insider. Thanks, everybody.
Driving directions on your phone? Oh no! That's not fun! Navigate hands-free with Apple CarPlay.